Hey, Kimikaze here. Just going to run through a bit of copper plating with you, some of the variables I've gone through. Done about 15 different experiments now, and I think I found some of the greatest ones that help. 5 volts with 1,000 milliamps. I've tried 3.5, 4.5 is okay. 5 just seems to get, the peak, no burning, and 1,000 milliamps, which you can drop down to 250, 500, but 1,000 milliamps, bubbles instantaneous, can copper plate in around 5 minutes. Using warm water is always a guarantee, speeds up the process. Cold water generally takes twice as long, so warm water is going to increase the variables. More copper in there, so I generally put 2 pieces together. As you can see, there's a little bit of bluey green on there, so the copper sulfate's coming very well off the copper that I've got there. Okay, well, what I do next is we glove up and we will put in some water. 4 parts water, 1 part hydrochloric acid. Many people say hydrochloric acid doesn't work, sulfuric acid is the one you need, or manuric acid. Vinegar, well, vinegar is quite cheap, but again, the experiment I did took a little bit over 10 minutes to start the full copper plating, where hydrochloric worked almost 5 minutes with the very first test. And since using warm water, I put a little bit of salt in there too, iodized salt, potassium chloride. Don't know what it does in the chemical reaction department, but I can see it gives it a definite thicker coating on the object that I'm copper plating. It's considerably thicker. You get a little bit of residue to wipe off, but it is still thicker underneath with the iodized salt. So always adding a little bit of that has helped me. So again, we can put the 100 mils, 1 part hydrochloric in, and mixes pretty well by itself, but make sure you give it a little stir every now and again just to keep it all mixed up well. Otherwise, some areas can get a large group of the positive charged electrons, and you'll end up with a burnt section on your object. This is stainless steel, and I've copper plated it. Stainless steel, copper plated. So that's how good my method works with copper plating things. Firstly, I try and connect my 1000 watt, 5 volt USB charger up, and I've burned it out because I've touched the bulldog clips. So after that fail, I go to the 5 volts, 250 milliamps. It's quite a little bit slower, but what I do is I repair my 1000 watt milliamps. So I unscrew it and see the fuses popped, and so I bridge it with a bit of that stainless steel wool you can see there. Also good to give a 50-cent piece or any of your objects you're copper plating a bit of a scrub up. Juggle around, make sure they do not touch, and you'll see I turn it on here, and it doesn't work straight away because I'm coming to the conclusion that I've burnt out my 1000 milliwatt USB. So letting you know what happens here, I've got the copper, which is the anode, connected to the positive, and it releases oxygen, O2, and you've got the cathode, which is black wire, negative, connected to the object that is pulling the copper to it, and that releases H2o. So inverse, the positive charged ions go into the water and they're attracted to the negative from the positive, which is the anode. It oxidizes the copper off, basically rusts it off into the water. As you can see, there's probably little bits of rust floating around in there shortly. And then the negative attracts it and pulls those positives to the negative, and therefore start to cause the copperization. So I'll get rid of the 250 milliamps, and I'm now on to the 1000 milliamps. The 5 volts again. As you can see, there's bubbles all over that 50-cent piece. Might have a closer look. And yeah, it's bubbling hard now. As you can see, it's coppered up pretty good already. The key is also a good object to copper. I've done quite a few, just ones that I use regularly. It's hard to find in a bunch of 10 or 15 keys. Make a copper, simple, easy to find, and it lasts for ages. I've had a couple of keys on there now for about 2 months. They show no signs of wearing. As you can see, that's what a 50 cent usually looks like, nice and shiny, and now it has that goldy orange brown copper look. It's pretty durable, so you give it a good rub and it'll come up nice and shiny, extra shiny. Alrighty, time to give the key a go. Now you'll see straight off the bat how fast the setup goes. The warm water, 1 part hydrochloric, 4 parts warm water, quite a fair bit of copper in there to throw out the positive electrons. And once I get this key jiggled up, nice good view, you'll see as soon as I turn it on, it activates straight away, and it's around 5 minutes. I've done a smaller key and it did it in less than 5 minutes. So it definitely works on instant bubbles, instant reaction. Also, what I think happens is the more you do it, the better the solution becomes, because the key can only absorb so many ions. The positive electrons that don't get absorbed by the key, you'll see little bits of rust down the bottom. So that means the water is just full of like sodium copper sulfate solution, and it's absorbing it as fast as it can, and whatever doesn't get absorbed sort of falls off and floats to the bottom. So if I could put a large object in there, a copper plate, it would do it still pretty quick, but because the solution is pretty saturated with copper now, it happens quite quick. So have a bit of a watch and you can see it virtually change colour before your eyes. It's pretty quick how fast it happens. See, it's already started now. The more copper in there, the better. Obviously, I have tried it with small bits of copper in there. Still works, but takes longer. And I think what you're aiming to do is get that water saturated with the copper sulfate, which is that bluey stuff that causes, suppose it's rust or corrosion. Metal gets it and it's orange, copper gets it, it's bluey green. Hence why the bluey green water on the right is another one that is just really saturated. It's really quick. I'm going to put it in that stuff. Make sure to keep mixing it. It'll go great. What I usually do, if it's a special piece of object, I'll move the bulldog clip to not get that burnt look on it, but I'll give it a little bit of rub up with steel wool. So you can see the difference. And I always seem to have quite a few copper keys now, so the special ones have become the ones that are silver. I hope you enjoyed the copper plating.